fans. Hanna Barton with Brenden Schaeffer, previewing your 2025 Kentucky Wildcats today. And I must say, Brendan, I think Mark Stoops might have the hottest seat in the SEC. 4-8 last season, 18-20 over the last 3 seasons at Kentucky. And he's got the second largest buyout in college football in history if they were to make him go away. So, what can we expect from this Kentucky team this year? They lost 30 guys to the transfer portal, brought some people in, but what's going on in Lexington?
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy situation. It was recently that it was like, oh, is Mark Stoops leaving to take another job? And then it doesn't happen. And now it feels as though the program is moving in the wrong direction. The schedule's tough this year for Kentucky. There's a lot of unknown. You're trying to figure out a new quarterback. As of this recording, I don't believe they've announced it. We still feel that Zach Calzada is going to be the starter for this team. Cutter Boley remaining in the competition as of this week. But, there's a lot of uncertainty and unknown about what we can expect from this Kentucky team this year. And again, you're flipping the schedule from last year, and it's the same teams just in a different location. They had a really difficult conference schedule where, yeah, there's maybe a couple of games that you can project to say, hey, they're going to at least be in this. But other than those, you're really going to be searching for some opportunities here if you're Kentucky to even put together any conference wins.
You talked about Calzada. This is the third season Stoops has turned to that transfer portal to get a QB. He's familiar with the SEC. He spent time at Texas A&M, was the quarterback in that upset over Alabama, spent some time at Auburn, has been an incarnate word in recent seasons, and he did well at that level. I mean, passed for over 3,700 yards, 35 touchdowns, rushed for over 300, and has shown that he can play some football. He's obviously been in college football for quite a while, and they used the portal, brought in some veterans at wide receiver and running back. And so could this offense maybe show a little bit more than last season?
Yeah, I think it can. Like, it's very difficult to say, oh yeah, I remember Zach Calzada from 2021, that crazy game when he led A&M to an upset win over number 1 Alabama. Like, that's pretty good. But at the time I would have said, oh man, he's young in his career, he's on the way up. And then it just doesn't really pan out. Didn't have a great finish to that very season. Goes to Auburn, doesn't play, has to drop down a level to go play at Incarnate Word. And now it's like, what can we really expect from him jumping back into the SEC? Has got all the experience in the world, but he's not necessarily going into an environment here where, he's got all the weapons that some of his opponents are going to have. I will say this for Kentucky. They did hit the portal pretty hard and did so with some success. Now, some of this ranking may have been due to just the sheer volume of the number of transfers they brought in, but they were 10th in the country, according to 24/7 Sports, in the portal class ranking. So, like, they did reload through the portal. The way that ends up materializing on the field is going to be interesting to see, though.
Yeah, you kind of have to reload when you lose 30 guys. The portal
Right.
kind of have to bring them back in. Like you said, it might just be the sheer volume of that. They definitely are trying to replace some key losses on the defense. They lost their 2 most reliable D linemen, as well as their star defensive back to the NFL. They've got depth because of all the transfers that they've brought in, but the question is, like, how is this going to pan out when you actually get them all on the field working in a system together?
Yeah, it just has to be better than last year because they weren't good on the offensive side of the ball. 124th in college football last year in yards per game. And defensively, they were better. They were more middle of the pack, 41st in yards per game defensively. But when you that's a demoralizing way to watch a football season, to go, all right, our defense is actually pretty good, but they're going to end up looking even worse than they are because the offense is just putting them in some terrible situations. And to be that poor offensively last year, yeah, that's a reason they had to go to the portal. 124th. There's only 134 teams. So they were just not very productive on that side of the ball. Kind of feels like Calzada is the right guy to just kind of say, hey, we don't have a lot of expectations in terms of what people think we're going to do this year. We've had a guy that has at least had a moment in time where he's been able to defy the expectations. He's got all the experience in the world. He's played a lot of college football. Can he come in and lead this team and maybe surprise some people? I would say at this point, though, Hanna, like a bowl eligible season is something you'd probably take if you're Mark Stoops in Kentucky. You mentioned the buyout. That would maybe be a reason that they would have to be pretty displeased with his performance to fire him. But at the same time, this is a situation where He's been there for so long. He has been so successful, but has Mark Stoops run his course at Kentucky? This season may be the answer that determines that question.
And we'll take a look at that schedule in just a moment. The one last thing I want to touch on is we talked about this portal movement, all these players coming out, all these players coming in. We talked about maybe Calzada could be the guy they need this season, but as we mentioned, he's continuously turned to the portal for a quarterback and for other players. So what starts to kind of make me question about Stoops in Kentucky is he really developing a sustainable football program over there, or has it gotten to the point now where he's simply just trying to replace what he's lost each and every year?
Yeah, it's like the boat that's taken on water, and so you keep scooping it out with the bucket, but at the same time, there's going to be some mold that starts to grow in there. It's not to say that he hasn't put together nice recruiting rankings in the portal and been able to bring in talent. In terms of what could potentially help Zach Calzada this year do the best that he can at his job, I would look at a guy like Jamori Macklin and say, can he just really step forward and become a stud in that receiving room and be the number one and be somebody that on a national scale can get some attention? Like, they probably need somebody like that to step forward and just be a go-to target for Zach Calzada, and we'll see what they're able to do with it. But you're right. Like, I think the style of program at this point at Kentucky, if you're just taking on some water each and every year and you're bringing in 26 new transfers to try to fix it, but you continue to kind of be in that, 4-8, 5-7, maybe you go 6-6 range, at a certain point, they might have to turn over a new leaf and go in a new direction. Will this be the schedule that does it to them? I guess is the question, Hannah.
Yeah, let's take a look at that schedule now. So you see quite a few home games to start off the season, which is pretty good. You got Toledo and Eastern Michigan. To be honest, I'm looking at that Toledo game and hey, that's a pretty strong MAC team that you're facing. Yes, you get to face them at home, but I don't think it's one that you're just like, all right, we're waltzing in there and getting the win. I honestly think that we're gonna know that first game against Toledo is this Kentucky team one that maybe shows a little bit more talent and promise than last season, or is it gonna be another long season for fans in Lexington?
Yeah, knowing that week 2 is that Ole Miss game, you do get it at home. You want to see a 52-3 win over Toledo just to be able to say, hey, the most we could do against this team is blow them out. It doesn't necessarily mean anything for Ole Miss coming to town. But if they beat Toledo 16-13, now you're talking about going, how the heck are we going to keep pace with Lane Kiffin's offense and Ole Miss coming to town? So that I do think is important to set a positive tone against Toledo. That being said, Eastern Michigan, okay, like when the total is 4.5 at DraftKings Sportsbook, and that is what it is for Kentucky, 4.5 on win total, even odds, which means they're just as likely to go 4-8 as they are 5-7, but nobody's really counting on them to go 6-6. If I'm trying to find a way to 6, we'll start with Toledo. We'll give them Eastern Michigan, give them Tennessee Tech. I always feel like Kentucky plays Louisville well, even if Louisville is having a better season. You can't say that's just automatically going to be a win. I think it's on the road this year, but that's one that they're probably going to want to get. When we did the Vanderbilt peer review, I told Vanderbilt fans, like, yeah, I think the Kentucky game is one that you guys need to get because it's at home. For Kentucky fans, I'll say I'm picking Vanderbilt in that game, but if you want to go out there and find a way to get bowl eligible, I think you're going to need to leave with that game against the Commodores. Hannah, you go to Auburn, like that's the trick of it too. When you just look at the home slate for Kentucky, I guess the upside is, hey, the big boys are coming to town, and if you can win one of them, it's going to be a memorable moment for your program's history. The downside is, like, you would have loved to have gotten one of those Vanderbilts or those Auburns at home this year.
Yeah, if I'm looking at one home game that can kind of be this upset or this spark for Kentucky, I'm kind of looking at that Tennessee game.
Okay.
Because not too far down the road, and there's always a little bit of a rivalry between Kentucky and Tennessee, just with the border war kind of situation. But we don't know what to expect from Tennessee this year. Do I think that they're still obviously going to be the favorite in that game? Absolutely. But if I'm looking at one game that could maybe be this upset spark for a Kentucky team, especially they might need it in the middle of the season, coming off of that South Carolina, Georgia, Texas slate, where they're like, man, we just need something to kind of make us feel like we still have a wheel hanging on this thing. I would be looking at that Tennessee game.
Yeah, and that's where you could really start to build a path to bowl eligibility, because if they find one of those tough home games, and again, you host Texas, you host Ole Miss, you host Tennessee, you host Florida. I mean, maybe Florida if DJ Lagway is injured, because that happens sometimes with him, and that's later in the season. So he's been through a grueling season. I won't say that I can count him out against Florida. I just, it's hard to predict any one of these individually. And so that's where it does get a little bit tricky for me. But I do look back and say, what if that transfer portal class is enough? And Mark Stoops, as much as we're kind of down on what he's done recently, what he's been able to build prior to this last run at Kentucky has been ridiculously impressive. That's historically a basketball program that football is secondary, and it's not even really secondary. It's just kind of an afterthought. And he has built it with his longevity there into something to be proud of. You want it to stay that way, though. And to do that, I think you certainly have to get at least bowl eligible, maybe try to surprise some people with a winning record this season. Certainly the sports books don't think you can do it. Hanna, when it comes to the 4.5 win total, I am going to err on the side of, kind of believing in Kentucky, but that's not really saying a lot. They could go 5-7 and clear this win total. I think they'll do that. How much further they go, I'm going to have to be pinned down on and make a tough decision to say.
Do you think 5-7 is going to be enough to kind of break that kind of hold that Mark Stoops and Kentucky have on each other right now, and they're just going to say, you know what, we're going to throw out the money to do it. We got to bring in
Yeah.
someone different.
Yeah, I think if they don't at least go to a bowl, there's no conversation to be had. This is the SEC. You respect what he's been able to do there for so long, but if they don't have at least a 500 season to make a bowl game, I can't imagine keeping him. I just can't, because you'll just do the same thing next year. There'll be 30 guys that say, I don't want to be a part of this. We didn't win in the SEC. And there'll be 30 that come in from other programs to say, okay, I didn't play it. I didn't play at Florida. I didn't play at LSU. Maybe I get to play here. Or, hey, I was at Incarnate Word. Maybe I can go play SEC football. Like, you can't continue to do this year in and year out. The buyout will get a little bit more manageable each year that he's with the program. And so I would say 6-6 isn't even a guarantee to save him necessarily, but 5-7 certainly won't.
We'll have to see what the future holds for Kentucky and Mark Stoops. That was our preview for the 2025 Wildcats. If you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe to Southeast Sports Fans on YouTube, and we can't wait to see you guys again for our next preview. Thank you for joining us today.